みんなに忠告しておこう。
だことを自分の都合のいい
タリングキスミント。
It's 1994. The Lion King is topping the box office. The Insane Clown Posse has just released their second studio album to widespread critical acclaim, and the world is being rocked by the greatest anime of all time, Frantic, Frustrated, and Female.
I knew it! I can't have an orgasm!
And while all this was going on, the 30-something Hideo Kojima was hard at work on an adventure game called Policenauts. A spiritual successor to his Blade Runner ripoff Snatcher, Kojima decided to plagiarize from other sources of Hollywood for his new piece. You have to remember the tentpoles of science fiction at the time weren't exactly there for realism, so for this particular story, Kojima turned to more grounded media like the then popular genre of buddy cop movies, and it becomes quite obvious early on that Kojima had just watched Lethal Weapon before he sat down to make Policenauts. The protagonist and his partner are practically one-to-one recreations of Riggs and Murtaugh. Hell, the first time you go and get your partner, he all but says,
I'm too old for this shit.
But I'm getting ahead of myself. Policenauts follows Jonathan Ingram, a man who was once part of the legendary squad of proto-astronauts called the Policenauts. A tragic accident happens while they're out on mission, and Jonathan vanishes for 2 decades, lost in space inside of a cryosleep chamber, and he's widely presumed to be dead. When he is found, the world is not how he remembers it. His wife has since remarried, mankind has begun to colonize space and travels freely between Earth, what they now call home, and outer space, which they call the beyond. The game opens in Jonathan's office. He's a down-on-his-luck private investigator, one who wants nothing to do with space, still holding trauma over the accident. While you wait for a new client to arrive, the game introduces you to its point-and-click gameplay elements, and you're introduced to exactly what kind of world you're getting into. If you click on Jonathan's badge, you learn of a recent case he took on to find a missing child. By the time he solved the case, the kid had already been killed, his organs harvested and sold to the highest bidder. Sorry, kid, is all that Jonathan can muster. He's living in a seedy world, and he's been jaded by it. The level of detail here is astounding, even by modern standards. For example, on the back wall here, there are 4 newspaper clippings posted. In a lot of games, these would be a cluster, and you would click on this general area, and you'd get some text like, "These are from back when we first launched." But here, each of these newspaper clippings are its own unique object, with unique text depending on which newspaper you click. When you select things like the photos sitting on Jonathan's desk, you can read about different aspects of the photo depending on what you click on. In addition, clicking on the same thing several times will give you more and more information about it, something that's carried over from Snatcher, and something that will become one of the more frustrating elements of the game later on, but we'll talk about that when we get to it. The art design of Policenauts is one of its biggest strengths. On its original release on the PC-98, the game used pixel art, but all subsequent releases have used cell animation by AIC, the same company that made Frantic, Frustrated, and Female.
Next time, we'll both come together.
The animation's nice, and it definitely gives a lot of life to scenes that wasn't present in the original release. However, there are times where I wish you had the option to switch back to the original artwork, because some of the PC-98 pixel art is just breathtakingly gorgeous. When you've spent enough time listening through your voicemail, at long last your client arrives. It's Lorraine, Jonathan's ex-wife, who he hasn't seen since the accident. She stays in the shadows. Unlike our protagonist, time has aged her. She is now in her mid-50s, and she wants Jonathan to remember her as she was when they were married. She tells you the details of her case. Her husband, Kenzo Hojo, has gone missing, and she wants Jonathan's help in finding him. The two of you catch up somewhat over the course of this conversation, and you can ultimately choose on your own whether or not to take the case. Regardless of which you choose, Lorraine hands you 3 pieces of evidence that her husband left her in the event that something happened to him. A few pill capsules, a leaf that's been broken in half, and the word Play-Doh. Sure, whatever. Jonathan watches through a window as Lorraine returns to her car and bears witness to her assassination via car bomb.
Lorraine! 車から離れろ!
He runs out of the office in pursuit, and you get the other half of Policenauts' gameplay, the shooty bit, a duck hunt kind of gallery shooter. You pause in a given scene and your enemy will occasionally jump out of cover to shoot at you and you have to get them first. However, no matter how many bullets you lay into Lorraine's killer, the man just keeps limping away, losing large amounts of white blood in the process. At the end, he manages to escape capture and Lorraine dies in your arms. We cut to Jonathan's first flight into the Beyond, where he finds himself sitting next to this purple-haired goblin man named Redwood, who gives you some exposition about the world and his particular race of people, bioengineered humanoids called Frozeners, who are like humans but better suited to the harsh environment of space. You also learn a bit about one of the major political forces in Beyond, the all-powerful Tokugawa group headed up by one of your former policenaut buddies, Sadaoki Tokugawa. The Tokugawa group has had their hand in just about every industry you can imagine, from infrastructure to weapons manufacturing to pharmaceuticals. As such, Sadaoki is an untouchable juggernaut, one of the most powerful men in the expanding human civilization. We'll catch up with him later, for old time's sake. For now, we head over to the Beyond Police Department to link up with Ed Brown, our former partner from our policenaut days. Unfortunately, the past few decades have not been kind to Ed. He's still working as a police officer, but he now serves in the Vice Unit, the dregs that the department keeps in the basement for bottom-tier work. As we'll later learn, Ed has had his own trauma to deal with. While on the force, he had a run-in with a junkie who had overdosed on the popular drug narc and had started stabbing his own family. Just as he was about to turn the knife on his son, Ed shot the junkie, killing him. Following this incident, Ed adopted the now orphaned boy as his own son, and has refused to fire a gun since, feeling the act of shooting the boy's father right in front of him was a sin he couldn't grow past. As such, he is reluctant to join Jonathan's little quest when he hears about it, but he comes around with the prodding of the other two members in Vice, Dave and Meryl. Some people might recognize Meryl here. She is one of the many elements of this game that are either repurposed from or later be repurposed for the Metal Gear franchise. While Dave and Meryl are informally part of your squad now, they won't be coming with us for most of our detective work. Instead, they'll be doing research from the office here, alongside the local forensic expert Victor, aka totally not the dude from Akira. We give Victor the pills and the leaf we got from Lorraine for examination, and we learn that there's not much unusual about them. The leaf is a leaf from the black poppy, which is the plant that the drug narc is derived from, and the pills are normal medication that are distributed by the Tokugawa group, although there is, interestingly enough, something strange about the markings on the pill capsules. Each pill is missing a portion of the Tokugawa logo. Not much to go on, especially not in regards to the mystery of Kenzo Hojo's disappearance, but since this is all we have, we might be able to find out more about these pills from the Tokugawa Pharmaceuticals building not too far away. Before we go, however, we stop by the Chief of Police's office so Ed can tell him what we're doing. The Chief of Police is yet another of our old policenauts buddies, Gates Becker. Again, we do a little catching up and he allows us to go on this wild hunt for a missing man as long as we don't cause too much trouble. Of note, up here in the Chief's office is our old ghoul friend Redwood. Turns out he's an officer too, though he's decidedly more hostile to us than he was before. He reveals to us another ability that the Frozeners have. They can alter their personalities at will, which is why he acted so nice and welcoming to us earlier. He gives us a pop quiz about bomb defusal. Which wire should you cut? Red or blue? There is a right answer to this, and it's the blue wire. Cutting the red wire is just an old cliche, he tells us. He's a strange fellow, this one.
どうかアウトだ。コロニーに穴が開いたぞ。
Anyway, off to Tokugawa Pharmaceuticals. Once we arrive, the guards let us investigate Hojo's old workspace, and there's a suspicious locked door in the back that no one can enter without Tokugawa's express permission. Probably not important. There's a lot of stuff to click on in Hojo's office, but the only important thing is this little note in the back, a schedule indicating that Hojo was planning on bringing 100 units of K9 to the central hospital. What's K9, you ask? Well, here's another hallmark of Kojima sneaking its way into the game. Like many of Kojima's work, there's a lot of lore and world building that's not crucially important to the plot that you can skip over if you want to just play the game. For those who care, there is an extensive encyclopedia hidden in your options menu, with huge swaths of text detailing the world, its history, its major factions, and so forth. The entries are even daisy-chained together with these hyperlinks and green text, letting you fall down a Wikipedia-esque rabbit hole if you really want to. Here you can read some of the details about K9. It's a revolutionary drug delivery system that Tokugawa is developing, and it helps various medications work more effectively in zero-grav environments. So we have to swing by the hospital to learn a bit more. But before we do, let's head back to the station to talk about how Policenauts builds character using its game mechanics. The police station is where the game's gun training mode is. You can practice the gallery shooter section of the game by shooting targets. This is a common thing in any video game that uses guns, but Kojima uses this expected mechanic to further some of the characters in some really interesting ways. Once you get above a certain score in the training mode, some of the characters in the police station will come by to practice themselves, giving you little scenes where you can talk to them. For example, if you get Dave to come down, you can watch him intentionally shoot these human-shaped targets in the arm, and he tells you that he always prefers going for non-lethal, since you're rarely in a situation where shooting to kill is the best outcome. Conversely, you can also get Redwood to come down, where he blasts an impossible number of bullets right into each target's head with incredible speed and mocks you for being a worse shot than he is. These scenes, though minor, are a nice way of building on some of the characters who, at this point, haven't shown up too much in the main plot. We have one more place to stop by before we head to the central hospital, the Hojo Household. Our wife Lorraine had a daughter with her now missing husband, a famous news anchor named Karen Hojo. She is the only one occupying the house at the moment, seeing as her parents are either dead or missing, and she's not too happy to see us. She thinks Jonathan was a negative in her parents' marriage, seeing as Lorraine never forgot about Jonathan and would frequently fight with Kenzo about her lingering feelings for us, in large part because she still carried around an old photo that, funnily enough, Jonathan also keeps in his office. Ed vouches for our character though, and she lets us inside to talk about her dad. We also learn about an illness that Karen has, aplastic anemia, the symptoms of which are exacerbated given that we're in space, and it will likely kill her if she can't receive a rare bone marrow transplant. Another fun piece of world building is that Karen still presents the news despite being at home with a debilitating illness. New virtual reality technology has effectively created a deepfake of her likeness, which can be used to deliver the news in her absence. Interestingly enough, the BBC, no, not that BBC, is one of the few entities not under the direct control of the Tokugawa group. At the back of the house is Hojo's personal study, where he has conveniently left a spare ID card that we're all too happy to borrow. Plus, in the back of the house you can find a strange little poster consisting of 8 family crests, one of which is the Tokugawa crest. Even more interestingly is that you can check out Hojo's CD collection, and literally every single one of these CDs is a unique object you can click on and play a different song from, another testament to the sheer attention to detail in this game. Furthermore, there is one CD that's blank that Jonathan and Ed will remark on if you click on it. You don't have to click on this, but if you do, it will give you some completely unique dialogue later on because, spoiler alert, this blank CD becomes important later. It's another impressive hallmark of Kojima's writing, letting the player lightly customize their playing experience by rewarding them with unique scenes if they go out of their way to investigate things that they don't have to. Also, there's a mechanic similar to this whenever you load into the game. Every time you load a save, you have the option to view a little recap, which is a dynamically changing text summary of the plot so far, another completely unnecessary detail that really helps build to the cinematic experience the game is going for. But now we can drop by the hospital, and hey look, it's Basic Instinct.
It's nice.
This is Chris. She actually has a history with the policenauts since she was a teen model who did a photo shoot with us back before we went into space. Nowadays she works as the director of the central hospital. She has a little information, but says we should speak to the head pharmacist in the next room over. So we do so, but not before a robotic mosquito flies into the scene to force us to literally play titty slapper until we kill it. Wouldn't be a Kojima game without this shit. A quick pop into the pharmacy introduces us to Ishida, another Tokugawa employee who's pretty tight-lipped when it comes to answering our questions. Our conversations with both Ishida and Chris indicate that we'd have better luck talking to Tokugawa directly. And wouldn't you know it, there's a special event happening at the top of the Tokugawa building right this moment. A party celebrating the development of K9. The main Tokugawa building is called the Prop, a gigantic space pillar looking over all of Beyond that is so huge that it's called the gateway between heaven and earth. We managed to get access by flashing our past with Tokugawa as policenauts, and we learned more about the seedy side of this game's universe. While the poor communities have been ravaged by organ harvesters, the wealthy have their own share of, shall we say, unusual peculiarities. At this zero-grav party, there are several clones described as recreations of long-dead actresses and models, who serve exactly what purpose you think they serve. Float around the party a bit and you'll eventually find Tokugawa, who is currently mingling with Salvatore, the only other policenaut we haven't met yet. And what do you know? Chris from the hospital. We do a little socializing, but Tokugawa is quick to clam up as soon as we get to the real reason that we're here. Jonathan comes to believe Tokugawa is directly involved both in Hojo's disappearance and Lorraine's death, but Ed holds us back and we bounce out of there. Also, this is one of the biggest head scratchers in the game. There's a few instances of the characters having to act inexcusably dumb for the plot to work in Policenauts, but this is one of the most blatant for me. So, by the end of this scene, we know Tokugawa is corrupt. He's being painted as the primary antagonist at this point. Furthermore, we know that Chris has some kind of intimate relationship with him, and yet, neither Jonathan nor Ed ever even offer the idea that Chris herself may be at all implicit in whatever crimes Tokugawa is behind. Never crosses their mind, and we'll see that bite them in the ass soon enough. But this disconnect between assumptions that the player will be making and what Jonathan and Ed refuse to acknowledge adds to a certain ludonarrative disconnect, taking you a bit out of the story and not in the normal fourth wall breaking ways that Kojima often intends. Well, whatever. Time for Act 2. So it's clear that something stinks here, but we need some actual evidence before we can accuse the all-powerful Tokugawa of anything untoward. For now, Ed takes us back to his place, where we meet his family. He has a daughter, the gymnast Anna, and the adopted son we discussed earlier, whose name is Mark. Although Ed has grown to love Mark as his own by this point in his life, they share a troubled relationship as Mark is a selective mute. He hasn't spoken a single word since Ed killed his father, instead communicating using a drawing tablet. Ed is constantly worried that Mark will never see him as a father figure, but Jonathan encourages him to just give the kid some time. Ed's wife died some years ago, so Anna does the cooking these days. She prepares a dinner for everyone, and we get one of the more amusing diversions you can get into if you fuck around during gameplay. While at dinner, there's this big container of high-calcium milk you can drink, and if you keep making Jonathan drink it, he'll eventually get sick, and this will become an entire subplot that you can completely miss if you don't find the calling to drink excessive amounts of milk during dinner. There's a decent chunk of content like this, stuff that's hidden until you click on the same commands over and over again. As mentioned, this is a carryover from Snatcher, which really took this to an extreme. Hell, there's an entire subplot of that game regarding the possibility of your wife being unfaithful that you're only going to find if you repeatedly investigate a crowd while you're waiting for an informant. Actually, wait, tangent time. So, Snatcher was the game Kojima made before this. It's considered the spiritual predecessor to Policenauts. It's another sci-fi adventure that blatantly rips off popular movies where you're playing the role of a hard-boiled space detective trying to uncover the plans of a group of machines called Snatchers, which are humanoid robots that look human and are trying to take over the world. In this game, again, there's an entire subplot about your wife that you can very easily miss. If you keep clicking on the crowd here during a very specific section of the game, your character will see his wife walking around in an amorous way with the chief of police, who you later find out, spoilers, is actually a Snatcher. You can call your wife on the space phone and ask if she's having an affair, and she reacts exactly how you expect and then changes the subject, and then this never comes up again. Like, you go through the entire game, you beat the game, and have a happy ending with your wife, and this whole affair subplot is never mentioned. What happened here? Kojima? Someone? Sorry about that, I wasn't going to make a whole Snatcher video, but I couldn't get that out of my head. Anyway, Policenauts. While we eat, we discuss the case with Ed, and eventually we get a mysterious call from an anonymous source claiming to have information for us. They ask us to meet them at the local space museum, and we're all too happy to oblige. Exploring this museum is actually pretty fun. There's a lot of detailed pages about the various spaceships, and there's even an entire exhibit dedicated to the Policenauts, though this is also where Policenauts as a game starts suffering from the same problems most point-and-click adventures tend to, which is that you eventually have to click on something very specific to advance the plot, but there's so many things to click on and nothing tells you what the one plot-relevant thing you need to click on is, so you can spend absolutely forever clicking on every pixel in the museum, wondering why the informant isn't showing up. I was stuck on this section for literally 30 minutes before I accidentally clicked on the right item that made our guy show up, which was supremely frustrating to say the least. Our informant is some dude in a spacesuit who tells us some spicy details. The true purpose of K9 is to distribute narc. Tokugawa and the bigwigs behind it plan to take advantage of the so-called over-medicated populace by clandestinely drugging the entire population with narc. They have managed to essentially bisect the narcotics such that each half can be hidden in the gelatin of separate pill capsules. On their own, a pill does nothing. However, when two pills containing one half of the drug are taken together, it forms and synthesizes narc within the body.
The hard part was making it so it can't be detected. It's split into two elements which combine in the brain to create Janus. It then sends signals that alter the production of cohesion in fertility.
Oh, sorry, I don't know where that clip of Utopia came from. The astronaut also tells us that the secret of the pill capsules is hidden in a CD that Hojo has somewhere in his house that can be read on special computers hooked up to the Tokugawa network. We've only seen 2 of these computers so far. There was one in Hojo's workplace and one in the hospital pharmacy. So, first job, find the CD. This is where being thorough earlier on can reward you, because if you checked out Hojo's music collection earlier, then you know exactly where the CD is. So, back to Karen's house. This is also where drinking all that milk earlier starts to affect us. While we're here, be sure to take note of the family crest that Hojo has on the wall. The astronaut mentioned that knowing these crests will be important to the whole CD thing. So we grab the CD and head to Hojo's office to see what's on it. But uh-oh, Hojo's office has been cleaned out. The computer's gone and the note on his calendar indicating the 100 units of K9 that he was delivering has been erased. Whoever it is we're chasing, they're one step ahead of us. Well, we know of one other place we can go to find a good computer, so we head over to the hospital. And again, if you drank too much milk, then Jonathan will get the runs and have to spend some time in the bathroom. You see this little subplot? It's so amusing and yet completely missable. It's a great touch to making the game more memorable. So we head to the pharmacy and, Chris is still here. She wants to know what we're up to, and Jonathan and Ed tell her because they don't suspect her for some reason, and she allows us to use the pharmacy computer. She also offers us some medicine for our gastrointestinal problem. But regardless, time to see what's on this CD. It's protected by a passcode, and I hope you wrote down those family crests earlier, because if you don't remember them, you are straight up softlocked out of the game until you figure this out. I'm not kidding. You can't save and you can't load to an earlier point in the game where you could go back to the Hojo house for this. You are stuck in a loop, continually guessing which crest belongs to which name until you get it right. There's a copy of the crest list inside the manual for the game, like the physical manual, but if you misplaced your manual, then you are shit out of luck. Now, this might not be as much of a problem for Japanese players. These are all real historic family crests that you might know about. Hell, even I can recognize the Tokugawa crest from my old world history class, but for English readers, most of these crests probably don't mean much to you. Luckily, you can just Google it nowadays, but still. And then, when you put in the right crests, I was just dying laughing when I heard this. This CD is essentially the hard evidence we need to prove the pill capsules are being used to drug the populace. So finally we have what we need to stick it to Tokugawa. So we jet back to the station and tell our forensic analyst what's what. And wouldn't you know it, Redwood was here earlier and he took the damn pills we had given Victor to analyze. That greasy fuck. Meryl gets a call on the space phone. It's the informant again, asking us to come back to the museum. Another strange bit of writing here. Meryl points out that it's a woman's voice this time, and both Ed and Jonathan completely write this off. Like, I'm gonna spoil something, this is a trap. Going to the museum is a trap, and the person on the space phone, while never confirmed to be Chris, was probably Chris. But whatever, our genius detectives have another car trip to make. Funny enough, it's in the ambition of Policenauts that its flaws are made most obvious. When you've got such a huge world and story but are dedicated to a specific and singular narrative, you tend to run into these insufferable contrivances where characters have to willfully do dumb things while you're angrily shaking your controller at them. Like here, Jonathan and Ed have been lured into a trap, and when we get to the museum, we are confronted with the beheaded corpse of the informant. Turns out it was the scientist Ishida. The presumed killer attacks us with a gun, their own identity hidden beneath a spacesuit. You manage to shoot him down, however, Ed insists that you deal with the pressing matter of the robotic mosquitoes that are incidentally also attacking you, and you leave the body you just shot for the police to investigate later. This is after you've already learned that the most powerful political force in Beyond is corrupt and holds control over the police force, and after you know that there's a rat involved in the case that's actively trying to stop you from learning the truth. So you already know the police force is untrustworthy, and you don't want to at least unmask the guy? I mean, come on. Actually, I have a question for anyone who might have played this game before. Who was this? I don't think the game ever actually told me. Maybe I missed it, but the body vanishes after this scene, and it wasn't any of the major characters because I'm pretty sure everyone we've met so far also shows up later in the game, so who was this? Anyone important? No? As I've probably made clear, while I enjoy the game, Policenauts isn't perfect. There are parts of this game that are clumsily written. There are also parts that are, shall we say, dated. Like the very 90s video game mechanic of being able to grope literally every woman you come across, except your ex-wife. She dies before you have the opportunity. But yeah, every girl you run into, up to and including your dead wife's daughter, and a hostage during a bomb defusal sequence, you can grab a handful from, and they really put a lot of thought into this. There's Meryl, who won't let you do anything until you beat her high score in the training mode minigame, which is an admittedly difficult thing to do with the normal Saturn controls. Hell, there's 3 people in the credits whose jobs were breast-bouncing supervision. Shout out to you, Kumi Sato, Junko Ishigami, and Mayumi Takeuchi. Someone had to do it. Anyway, back to the museum thing. We managed to escape, but there's some strange figure tampering with our car. They run away as soon as we call out to them, and oh no, it's the same guy who killed Lorraine. So we get into another shooting section, a car chase where you lay bullet after bullet into the guy, but he manages to survive. At the end of this section, both the motorcycle the assassin is riding and the car Ed is driving crash and the assassin escapes on foot. We chase him into a train station, get into another shooting section, and Ed calls Dave and Meryl to have them cut off his escape route by going to the next train station. We chase the assassin onto the train, and there's another really involved scene here. Following the white blood trail, we go through 3 train cars, and you can get into surprisingly in-depth conversations with every single one of these passengers while interrogating them about the guy you're chasing. When you get to the 3rd car, there's another contrivance. As soon as you walk in, it's very obvious that the assassin is the dude in the trench coat facing away from us, standing literally right where the blood trail stops. But Jonathan is all, nope, can't be him because the assassin didn't have a trench coat on earlier. I'm sure the passengers in this car aren't all unusually scared for any important reason. When you question everyone except the guy in the trench coat, one of the passengers breaks and tells us that the assassin stole his coat. Wow, big surprise. Another shooting section, and the man takes a hostage. It's Chris, again, who just so happens to be on the train. Jonathan, again, has no questions about this. Also, if you haven't figured it out yet, the game makes it clear here that the assassin is the Frozener, Redwood. I mean, Jonathan hasn't figured it out yet, but this close-up makes it abundantly clear to the player. Once the train stops, Redwood escapes and Chris begs us not to chase him. Again, raises no red flags with Jonathan. But whatever, we ignore Chris because Dave and Meryl have intercepted Redwood. However, by the time we arrive on scene, they got into a shootout and Dave is mortally wounded. We get to a drawn-out death scene where Dave delivers an almost comical line about how his favorite thing in the world isn't hamburgers, but Meryl.
俺ハンバーガーより好きなものがあるんだ。誰にも話してないけど。
何？
君だよ、メリル。
This is what happens when you don't develop your side characters enough. Dave has to deliver a silly line like this because pretty much the only things you know about him are A, he's always eating a hamburger, and B, he's always in the same shot as Meryl. God help you if you didn't get the training room scene where he talks about his preference for non-lethal shooting, because if you missed that, then he won't give you this dialogue here about how going for non-lethal doesn't always work, and his shallow death is even shorter and shallower as a result. This causes another disconnect between the player because Dave's death really doesn't inspire anything, since, again, you've had very little opportunity to get to know him, and he barely shows up in the story. However, Dave's death permanently affects Meryl for the rest of the game. Practically everything she does after this point relates back to the fact that Dave died with romantic regrets over her. And these character building moments from Meryl are similarly hard to get behind because Dave's death is so emotionally vacant. The narrative reason for this change in Meryl is there, but there's no emotional weight behind it because of how underdeveloped this character and plotline is. Anyway, Redwood has escaped into a luxury handbag shop, and there's a woman here he has hostage since Redwood hid a bomb in one of the bags in the store, and it's gonna blow if we don't defuse it. Speaking of this hostage, Kojima did take the time to inject some humor into this whole scene, since if you do grope the hostage, then you get an immediate game over, and if you go back and do it again, you get a second game over and some fourth wall breaking dialogue from Ed regarding your ceaseless perversion. This is one of the slower scenes in the game, one of the most jarring from a player standpoint. Policenauts as a whole is going for a big cinematic thing, it's what Kojima likes, so there's supposed to be tension in this scene, but look at all these damn bags. The way you get through this section is you have to carefully, one by one, compare each of these bags to one Meryl has because the bomb is hidden inside an authentic bag, and this store largely just sells knockoffs. Also, we get this absolute Steven of a line.
女らしくなれってデブからもらってたの。
So there's not much tension here because you spend forever playing spot the difference with 20 designer bags, and then when you actually get to the one with the bomb, that's when there's actually some tense gameplay because the whole defusal process has several steps and has to all be done in one go. Furthermore, this bomb sequence really demonstrates how long a con Redwood was playing with you. You remember the conversation about bomb defusal he threw at you back in Act 1? Well, when you get to the end of this bomb defusal section, it's down to cutting one of two wires, the red one or the blue one. Ed has been guiding you through most of this, but even he has no idea which wire to cut. Remember, if you mess up, then you have to start all over again. And I mean all over. So this is tense. And if you cut the blue wire like Redwood told you in the previous act, you die. Big brain on the Frozener. Also of note, when you leave this building, you learn that Dave's body has disappeared. Well, that's certainly not strange. So you saved the day, and it's time for Act 3. Actually, real quick, I want to say something about these acts. So Policenauts is nominally divided into 7 entire acts, but this division is really strange to me. Acts 1 and 2 each take several hours by themselves, making up a majority of the story. Every act after this point is really short, some of which take no more than 10 minutes. It's like Act 3 was arbitrarily divided into 4 different acts for no real reason. I'm really not sure why they did this. So we go back to the station to get chewed out by the chief. This is the whole hand over your gun and badge moment. In fact, Gates really does take our gun away. And I'll bring this up real quick. The gun Jonathan has is a unique one in the story. Since everyone else is a space cop, they have special lift guns designed to eliminate recoil, since that would be a problem in a zero-gravity environment. Jonathan is the only one who still uses a traditional weapon, which several characters give him shit over. So Gates takes our gun, though Ed offers to give us his if there's any more shooting sections. If you head down to Vice, you can talk to Meryl and get some post-hoc character development for Dave. Really would have been nice to have some of this while he was still alive. Jonathan and Ed decide to sneak into the Tokugawa Pharmaceuticals building at night to try and find more clues. Once they arrive, they find the door is unlocked and there's no security. Neither Jonathan nor Ed really question why you're suddenly able to just waltz right into the hidden factory in the back of the building, but you do so, and wow, look at all this. Poppy plants and an entire system for manufacturing art. Sure would be nice if we had a camera or something, huh? Well, regardless, Jonathan and Ed take this information right to the chief, who organizes an official raid of the building the following day. And as I'm sure you're already dreading, you walk into the factory and everything's gone. The plants are just normal plants, and the narc factory is just churning out standard pills. Tokugawa himself even shows up as the chief orders a sweep of the entire building. And uh-oh, it's Hojo, the missing man we've been searching for, capped in the head, plus there's video and forensic evidence of Jonathan doing it. Yes, it turns out the chief was in on everything. He and Tokugawa have set you up for the murder of Hojo, Lorraine, and the informant Ishida. You lose consciousness as you're being escorted out, and you wake up at Karen's place. While you were being brought to the spaceport to be deported back home, Karen and Ed rammed a news van into your transport and rescued you. This is another strange kind of scene. I don't really know why this whole bit was omitted from the story. Maybe it's because Jonathan is the player character and he doesn't really do anything during this escape, but the way it's conveyed in just flashbacks feels off to me. This is also when some romance stuff happens with Karen confessing a burgeoning love for Jean. That's totally not weird. But before things can get too spicy, you get a call on the space phone from Ed. There's some more fun fourth wall breaking dialogue here. You can look at Ed during the sequence even though this isn't a video call. Just before you hang up, Jonathan asks where his gun is, and Ed tells him he gave the gun to Karen before hanging up.
じゃあ、切るぞ。
エドの言う通りよ。銃は私が持ってるわ。
カレン。
うかつだったわね、ジョナサン。覚悟なさい。
カレン。
そのまま受話器をゆっくりと置いて。
わかった。本気のようだな。
変なことを考えない方がいいわよ。銃の使い方くらいは分かってるわ。
どうするつもりだ。
そうね。こっちに来て。キスしなさい。
カレン。
どう？びっくりしたでしょ？
本気だと思った。
Ah, this bitch. This scene actually got me, I'm not gonna lie. Jonathan and Karen sneak into the central hospital and drop by the morgue. According to Ed, there's a paper trail linking the hospital to the distribution of the narc pill capsules, plus Hojo's body is probably there. Once you get inside, you find a lot of really strange shit, including Dave's kidney and the informant Ishida's heart and eyeballs. Turns out the hospital is a front for organ harvesting. This is a subplot that's been alluded to in various conversations in regards to how the human body isn't suited for space, and there's been an ever-increasing demand for organs since the humans and beyond are suffering from higher rates of organ failure. This goes all the way back to what we investigated in Jonathan's office back home, and to Ed's family, seeing as his wife died due to organ failure. So Dave and Ishida have already been chopped up for parts, and we find the body of Victor, the forensic analyst, floating in one of the tanks here. This is where the action really starts ramping up. Ed and Jonathan sneak onto the moon, and this is where the last hint Hojo gave us becomes relevant. The word Plato. Turns out this was the name of a crater in which Tokugawa had constructed a facility to store all of his harvested organs. While you and Ed marvel at this gigantic warehouse of corpses, our old policenaut buddy Salvatore drops by to give us some exposition. First, if it wasn't clear, he is working for Tokugawa along with Gates, and it turns out he's been doing so from the very beginning. And I mean the very beginning. Jonathan's accident in space during the Policenauts era happened because Salvatore, Tokugawa, and Gates had intentionally sabotaged the mission, having already planned a means of controlling Beyond, but knowing that Jonathan and Ed were too goody two-shoes to be in on the plan. He explains the depths of depravity Tokugawa had sunk to, how they harvested organs from anyone they could get it from, having worked with mafias on both Beyond and on Home to get even more organs. And we get into another shooting section. We kill Salvatore, as well as some of the other guards, and book it back to base. But, turns out the bad guys paid a visit to Ed's home while we were gone and kidnapped Mark. If we want to get him back, we have to once again go to the museum. So we do. Karen has set up a camera system with her BBC friends to help us keep an eye out for the culprits. We eventually find Mark being held by another weirdo in a spacesuit. Ed runs out to rescue him and gets shot by Redwood. So Ed is rushed to hospital, and Karen is too. Her anemia has taken a turn for the worse, and it looks like she's gonna die without that bone marrow transplant. We have a little chat with Karen's doctor, and
ごく稀ですが、親子でも一致の可能性はあります。ただ、カレンの両親はすでに死亡している。はい、残念ながら。そうです。念のために、あなたの HLA 型も調べさせてください。ああ、気休めだが。
Oh. She's our daughter, isn't she? Yeah, probably. Anyway, oh no! Chris is in Ed's room and trying to kill him. If only there was some way Jonathan could have foreseen this turn of events. But yes, Chris is evil. We corner her and she gives us a sob story. She has been forced into working with Tokugawa as she got the hospital into crippling debt and would have lost everything if Tokugawa hadn't intervened. Furthermore, she has a son. Twins, actually. The Redwoods. Yes, Chris is Redwood's mother, but also, the drugged-out junkie Ed shot many years ago in front of Mark is Redwood's twin brother. Wow, what a twist that totally recontextualizes the story and isn't just a bunch of garbage thrown at the last minute. And that's the end of that. So it's all down to the wire and we have to go march on Tokugawa's offices. We head on over to the prop and... Oh my fuck. Yeah, you have to shoot all of these dudes, which is a nightmare, and then you get into the elevator and Redwood shows up in a mech. This is the final shooting section, slowly making your way up the building stairwell while getting into fights with Redwood as you go. After a long and arduous slugfest, you manage to finally riddle this motherfucker with enough bullets that he collapses, but as he says, no one kills Redwood but Redwood.
俺を殺すことはできないのさ、ジョナサン・イングラム。
I guess Kojima just read Ichi the Killer when he was making this part. So here's the final confrontation. Interestingly, it's not with Tokugawa, but with Gates in a really shiny mech. See, Gates is important here because he's the only person with the right bone marrow to save Karen, but he refuses to donate, so we're here to take his bone marrow by force, I guess? Cause, you know, Jonathan hasn't realized that he's Karen's dad yet. I brought this up a few times, but Kojima likes making cinematic games. It's been his intention and philosophy since the early days, making games that can match the emotional and visual experience of a good movie. And he's able to do that nowadays with all the money and modern tech he has at his disposal, but back in the day when he was making these little sci-fi games on more basic hardware, that kind of thing was significantly harder to pull off. It's admirable that he's managed to cram as much as he did into the story of Policenauts, but this ultimately results in an ending that is nearly entirely cutscene and falls a little flat. This is another thing that originally happened in Snatcher. There's a literal 30-minute long cutscene with the main antagonist in that game. Policenauts is slightly better, but only slightly. Here it seems you're going to get into a final fight with Gates, but instead Gates stands there and tells you to try and shoot him. So you do, and you go flying. You're in a zero-gravity environment, and the recoil on Jonathan's gun means every shot would just jet him off in whatever direction. So Gates riddles you with holes and laughs at you, and then goes into a roughly 10-minute long monologue about his evil schemes and a very Kojima-esque rant about the difficulties of mankind adapting to colonize space, before Jonathan reveals the gotcha. He's recording this with a camera Karen gave him, and it's being broadcasted live to the entire world on BBC. An enraged Gates decides to put an end to us, but who shows up but our main man Ed, firing a gun for the first time all game.
くたばれ警官したい。
We limp out of the building and Tokugawa shows up to try and stop us, but Meryl and the cops come by to arrest him since the truth about Tokugawa's organ harvesting plan has been revealed to the world and he's lost his power. This is what I mean when I say the writing of this game falls a little flat. Tokugawa is painted as the primary antagonist for so much of the game, this huge untouchable juggernaut sitting atop politics and industry. And then he just kind of gets arrested after you defeat a lesser antagonist in Gates. I don't know, it feels kind of deflating. Anyway, you get our epilogue. It's a short cutscene about a recovered Jonathan returning to home. He's not really cut out for space after all. There are cute little moments here with each of the characters, including a genuinely touching one where Jonathan hands Ed a drawing he got from Mark, where Mark finally calls him Dad. Karen has been cured and is back to working as a news anchor, now with short hair, and on the ride back we read a note from her where, shocker, she's our daughter.
あなたの娘、カレン。推進、忘れ物よ、探偵さん。ママに叱られるわよ。
Credits roll. Policenauts is often cited as one of the best sci-fi games ever made, and while I'll take issue with the ever made part, it certainly was one of the best back when it came out. The sheer amount of game they managed to stuff into the tech of the time is mind-blowingly impressive, and in the context of Kojima's body of work, you can see where a lot of his stylistic and directorial quirks came from, and how he's developed them over the years. For all of its faults, Policenauts has a fascinating narrative for a self-contained game. And though I griped about sections where you're just clicking on things to figure out what to do, there weren't many times where that happened. The game's well designed enough that everything feels intuitive most of the time, and that's not even counting how Policenauts serves as a prototype to the now common style of cinematic games, with huge stories rife with cutscenes and how thematically dense the narrative is, especially for a game from the 90s. If you have any interest in these older games, then it's an easy recommendation. Even knowing the story, it's fascinating to be able to craft your own experience with all the hidden scenes there are to find. Hell, you might even find one that I completely missed in this video. Give it a shot if you have a Sega Saturn lying around. Bye!